Cross-border, not just Mexicans, but they go to all of it.
Well, it's a disparity of hope, a disparity of service.
Right. People think it's only Mexico.
Partly when I was seeing people. I didn't think
If only my classes would do that. I do that and they just look right at me and keep right on talking. Okay, so what are when you hear border culture, what are some of the things that come to your mind? Go ahead and throw them out. Violence. Danger. What was the? Fear and hope. Geography. Family. Security. Oh, insecurity. Which one was it? Insecurity. Both. Okay. Insecurity. Separation.
Did you get disparity done?
I didn't. Disparity. Yeah, that's for sure.
Disparity of hope.
Yeah. Of hope.
Justice.
Injustice. Pain. Lack of understanding. Domination. Cartels. Extreme nationalism.
Misuse of power.
Misuse of power. Conquest. And I missed one. Killing of the innocents. Killing of the innocents. So right now we're looking at what do we know about the border culture. This herida abierta, as Gloria Ansaldúa calls it. So let's look at that. I'm going to set this back just so everybody can see. So let's look at the border culture. Did you have a question? What? Herida, wound. An open, yes, an open wound. Una herida abierta. So let's look at, so we've been looking kind of conceptually, we've been looking holistically. Let's look now at what are some of these specifics. Last week we went to, I gave a presentation at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And one of my dear friends, her husband works for the National Park Service, and he started talking about this project that he's been working on building roads, which is right on the border. And I brazenly and shamelessly, sin vergüenza, said, will you please take me? And he did. And so we spent a whole day, and I've noticed I haven't washed my car. We took my car, and the dust from the border is still on my car. And I keep thinking, you know, I really should wash it, but there's something, I just can't. So anyway, so we went down, we were in Tucson, and we took a day, and we went down near the Nogales. How many of you are familiar with that area at all? Wonderful. Okay. So we took a day and we went places where it was just basically us and the Border Patrol. And these are photos that I took. This is in between, you know, when we talk about border issues and we talk about the border, I feel like so often it stays abstract or it stays political or it stays, but this is what it is. And it took your breath away. I mean, it was almost like words couldn't, it was so big that I found that I just kind of stood there and took pictures and I couldn't quite process all of it. But this is you can see Nogales is right over there at the base of that mountains. This is a fence that runs the length from right here, which is several miles away, to Nogales. This is down in a wash, in a canyon, in an arroyo. And this is what Walt says they call them Normandy fences. Normandy fences. And what's amazing is when you stand here, you see, these aren't going to stop anybody. I mean, they're these huge, imposing, and first of all, it truly feels like a war zone there. They have, right now, the military, this is where people go right before they leave to go to Afghanistan. This is where they come to train to go to Afghanistan. So as we were driving around, even though it was it was technically or a public area, there, if I hadn't been in the car with somebody who knew what he was doing and where we were going, I can't fathom, it felt like a war zone. Big, what are the, not Humvees, but and soldiers everywhere. But what was so striking to me, and here's a horse skull right here, but one of the things that really struck me as I stood there, and I just tried to listen. I tried to listen to the water bottles. There's water bottles everywhere. There were a pair of jeans right here, and to listen to their stories. And what struck me was, this is a ton. This is phenomenally expensive. We're paying a lot of money for this, and this is not. It just kind of takes your breath away when you look at what the reality of this is. And when you look at, and right behind, this is the United States side and this is the Mexico side, there's just waves of water bottles, and there's also a well-worn track where people drive up and turn around, and people drive up and drop people off, and people walk across and they turn around and go back the other direction. And Walt also said that the other thing that they found is there's things called plasma cutters. I learned all this new vocabulary, Normandy fence, plasma cutters, where you can cut right through this, and people will drive in and lift out sections and drive right through and then put them back in. Or they bring big trucks that I didn't learn this vocabulary, go like this, and you can go down off and then just keep driving through. So and there's just miles and miles. What is there to cut this the iron fence, let's see if I can, whoops. These iron bars, people cut them with they call them plasma cutters. They're they're only about right here. Yeah. Well, if you want to drive through them. Yeah, yeah. And so, and the symbolism. And here was another one, and this was more like that fence that goes all the way to Nogales. And what struck me was, there's miles and miles of this. It's phenomenally expensive. But look, it stops right here, and then there's a barbed wire fence. And so all you have to do is just, walk around it. And one time Noe and I were talking, and he said that, because right behind his brother's house in Texas, there's this huge, it's like a 12-foot fence. And Amadeo said, he said, well, of course, they're going to bring a 13-foot ladder. These are the people who invented zero. What are you thinking? So what it brought home to me, it was just, and then right here, this is a road that the National Park Service built. It's right along the border. The reason that we got to go is that because Walt was in charge of building that road. He said this whole road, the length of it cost $165,000. Contractors are now building another road about 100 yards away that run exactly parallel to it. He says, I bet it's $165,000 a day. And literally when you see it, they run right beside each other the whole way. So it really brought, where I've been thinking about these ideas and the migration and the concept and all of that, and then to see the specifics of what is actually occurring. So, and the reason that this struck home so much is, as Gloria Ansaldúa says, the counterstance locks one into a duel of oppressor and oppressed. Locked in a mortal combat like the cop and the criminal, both are reduced to a common denominator of violence. This is why this matters. And these are just a few of what we know since 2001. The bodies of more than 1,750 men, women, and children have been discovered in the desert or mountains of southern Arizona. So when we talk policy, when we talk immigration, when people start talking politics, we're talking about real lives. People are dying. because of our current immigration policies. And these are just the bodies that we found. And this is just Arizona. This doesn't include Texas. This doesn't include New Mexico. Border Patrol agents are being killed. I did take a photo. I wasn't able to put it on this one, but we were walking through the middle of nowhere through the canyons, and there was this huge stone altar and it had a Star of David on the top, and it was a Border Patrol agent who had been killed there a couple of years ago. And there were two things that struck me. One, Walt knew this guy, and he was a Russian immigrant. He was a Jewish Russian immigrant who died on the borders between Arizona and Mexico. And then he was a young man, and in the stone, there was a bullet. And we were with, my friends had their kids, and they're 4 and 5, and all of a sudden Zachary came up and he brought this bullet. It was live. I mean, someone had put a live bullet in there, and because my friend Pammy took it, and she said, well, Zachary, let's show that to Daddy. And it was alive. It's the kind that, anyways, it's the kind that are hollow-edged or hollow-ended. It's hollow point. And that was tucked in the memorial of this Russian Jewish immigrant who had come to the United States and been killed on the border between Mexico and Arizona. Erwin.
I think it's important to put in perspective, especially for some of us that grew up around the border areas.
We need a microphone. Thanks.
It's very different over the last 15 years.
Exactly.
In terms of what's been built up, the new border that's there, the literal Iron Curtain that we see. But I think the other thing that's important to note,
Erwin, grab the micro. There we go.
That the contractor that's built most of the fence that's received the bulk of the contract is Halliburton. So while we may want to point fingers and violence and protect us, secure our borders, we have legalized theft through military contracts and Homeland Security.
Well, and when you see it, I think, even, and I knew that, but to live it and to see it and to see the water bottles and to see it brings it all home. And to listen, to just, if you stand in that spot where people are walking, you feel their stories. I mean, you feel them right there. And absolutely, as Erwin said, this has changed so dramatically. I grew up along the border. We went down to Juarez. I drove through Juarez all the time. In fact, this used to be very near a cattle ranch. My dad said, oh, you were on, and I can't remember the name of the ranch, but he used to come down here and buy bulls all the time. It has changed dramatically, night and day. And the other thing, and I lift this up because her family wants her name remembered, and that is Brisenia Flores. And she, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a 9-year-old undocumented immigrant who was shot by the Minutemen point blank in the face while she begged for her life. And her family has started a campaign. They want her remembered. They want her name lifted up. They do not want her story forgotten. And so when we're talking immigration and people are and it becomes so dogmatic, let's remember the people who are being affected by this. So let's then look back. We're going to go into, so thinking about that and thinking, what are our understandings of turquoise? What does turquoise symbolize? What have we as peoples looked to turquoise? Here are some of the words that again and again come through in our understandings. Sky stone, protection, sacred, safety, spirit, good journey, life-giving power, prayer, and embrace. And what I would like to offer and I would like to lift up is when we're thinking about immigration policies, when we're thinking about migration, what if these words, what if what we're experiencing right now on the borders, what if we can start bringing some of what the gifts of this stone, some of what it teaches us, some of what it brings to our lives. I'm not here to say about any specific policy, but what if our policies became infused with this land, this stone that is part of the land where we live has birthed. So let's look back at this timeline of migration. This is a extremely, I'm sure, I mean, it's as accurate as I could make it, a timeline of, we know that the people have been living here in the Southwest for at least 20,000 years, probably 30,000. And I love Stella Pope Duarte, who's an amazing author. She said that she got pulled over because we were in Arizona. And she got pulled over and a cop asked her, well, how long have you been here? And she said, well, on my mother's side of the family, 20,000 years. On my father's side of the family, they founded Tucson. How about yourself? So let's look at this timeline. It's like 20,000 years, Christ, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, 2011. But when we look at how long have people been walking, how long have people been living and walking and traveling and exchanging, and where we are right now is this teeny, 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 tiny blip of historical time. This is a song by Lila Downs, and the line that I wanted to bring your attention to is, and she's a tour de force, but is agua soy que tiene cuerpo, and water I am that I have a body. Sounds much better in Spanish. But when we look at that we need water to create turquoise, when I think about the water bottles littering the border, agua soy que tiene cuerpo, when I think about we're all part of this earth, we are all made of water, we are all made of it, what are the healing components of turquoise that we can bring to this? And Ellen Malloy, she writes, colors bear the metaphors of entire cultures. This is the borderland, right around Nogales. Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Sonora, Nogales, Mexico. This is a slab of turquoise. What my wish is when we're thinking about immigration, when we're thinking about migration, that our understandings, that our policies, that we learn from this stone that comes from this land where we live, and that they are infused with healing, with justice, with peace, with the sacred, with spirit. Questions or anything?
I'll come around with the microphone to be sure that we capture your comments on the video.
Okay, I think Erwin had one, Joseph.
Anyone else first?
Okay, well, let me come over to Erwin Rivera here and...
Thank you. As always, really appreciate the work you've put into this and what I've learned. I'd like to share with you a couple of young sisters that have, one still attending this campus, with the inspiration and their own cultural understanding of turquoise, created an effort called Campaña 2020, and within that is a campaign called the Turquoise Ribbon Campaign to Stop the Self-Hate, based on that philosophy. And basically what they've done with that inspiration of turquoise and this unique place of where we are culturally and geographically that we now call New Mexico, they did a facilitation of over 2,000 New Mexican youth, basically asking three things. What do you want in the year 2020? What are you willing to do to get it? Who else needs to be involved in your vision? Knowing that the number one obstacle of our young people is how they've been taught how to hate themselves. So with the power of the turquoise and the Turquoise Ribbon Campaign, it's to stop that self-hate, raise self-respect, and then hopefully have peace between the cultures. And it's been a phenomenal effort. It's some of those concepts from the youth has become legislation. Some have been ideas passed by even school boards. But again, it's rooted in that those indigenous qualities, elements of what are right under our feet, and that there is a uniqueness, though there's different kinds of turquoise around the world, there's a uniqueness about this turquoise that came from here. It was the highest valued, greatly prized, and it was what was collected the most in what is now Mexico City. I think it's in the National Museum. There's a mosaic about half the size of that wall that's made with inlaid turquoise, specifically that came from the mountains just south of here. So there's something unique and a calling.
It is a calling.
Specific of that stone, and specifically the stone from here.
And that's one of the things, it is a calling. And I personally believe if we in this room don't hear that calling, then who? If we in this room, we who live here, we who care, don't get involved or don't hear, then who? As Martin Luther King said, it is not the voices of our enemies that we'll remember, it's the silence of our friends. So go ahead, the stone that's still in your hand, go ahead and hang on to that. And one more time, I'm going to read that passage by Ellen Malloy. And just to absorb, to think about some of the ideas, the gifts of turquoise, to think about some of these ideas. And let me just read that one more time. I invite you to close your eyes and to just feel the elemental nature of that stone. On the desert horizon at dusk, where red rock meets lapis sky, at the seam of the Union runs a band of turquoise, recumbent upon the land's great darkness. This color is transient. Before night falls, blue-green is the last quantum of visible light to pass through the atmosphere without scattering. It can draw a person right down to the skin of the world. The tidal pull of light can shape an entire life, every heart-warmed pulse of blood and breath. With the person who you have been visiting with, one idea that you'll walk away with today. One calling, one understanding, one question, one idea. As you exchange that idea, go ahead and exchange the stone. Go ahead.
Hope for transparency of our government to understand all of these genocides. War machine is the main reason these walls are going up in order to let someone profit. And we're a country of immigrants. Our tax dollars are not being spent where we want them. And they talk about all the social services. But the true reason for all these walls is because there's very few people building.
One idea that you'll walk away with. Just go ahead and start tossing them out. I'll do my best to write. Enlightenment. Whoops. Others. One idea. Yes, Cynthia. The world is my community. Others. We are one. Others. Relationships, absolutely. Absolutely, thank you. Understanding. Understanding. Elect a congressman. Yeah. Okay. Legislation. Whatever your personal understanding is, whatever you walk away from this, our time together, I invite you to keep that close to your heart, to hold that, to not forget that. Because as I said, if it's not us in this room, then who? So thank you so much for sharing I know part of your very busy lives and coming together to talk about this. And I honor your work, I honor you, and thank you again so much for sharing your time. There's Joseph. Thanks.
Thank you, Dawn. As a final thought, I would like to add, if I may, Dawn, to your beautiful and deep illustration of turquoise and what it means to us and how tied we are as a region. So many of us know the center of our own Capitol building, the Rotunda, the famous turquoise inlay in the floor of the rotunda by Jack Drake. And the many years that I trampled through that as a young intern working for different senators and then later for the governor. And I would always stop and pause only because I knew personally the artist. But hearing this illustration and understanding more about our own roles in being active and understanding what's happening around us so that we can play a bigger part and so that we can share, you know, what we know and what we've learned. And not enough of that happens, and it's so important for us to be aware of that. I know I have small children, as many of you probably do, and it's important for me to share with them the experiences that I go through and that I've had to deal with, as you know, as we all have and such. And so it really bears a lot of meaning to me, because now at a time of the legislature and a new governor, a new administration, and all of the interesting changes in the discussions of immigration and how now in many ways New Mexico is being, whether we want to or not, pulled into this broader idea of what it means, what it doesn't mean, what it means to be a sanctuary state, as one of our presentations was all about. And so next time you're in the state capitol, and then realize how many folks, you know, visitors from other states were just so eager to visit our state capitol that is quite famous for its structure and design. Maybe we can think about that and remember more about Dawn's presentation. So I suppose if there isn't any more questions, I would like to thank Dawn for a very fabulous presentation. It was a great way to spend an afternoon. And I'll look around once more. Are there any questions for Dawn? Oh, yes, ma'am.
You know, legislation is what, you know, is what is on my mind. And I was wondering if there are any current bills that are related to this topic of immigration.
Definitely. There are bills that are about taking away, and that would be the whole kind of a whole other huge presentation. But right now, the rights of our undocumented community members there's several on the table to take those away. And I can follow up with, Martha. Thank you.
And are the walls also being built in New Mexico, as you saw in Arizona?
That's a good question. I have not been. I don't know. Does anybody know if these kind of fences are going up in southern New Mexico?
It's fencing primarily.
Right. Yeah.
We want to extend that wall construction, which comes right up to the Texas, New Mexico, Mexican border, and that, for some reason, is the extent of that iron wall. The rest of it has been reinforced fencing, with the exception of some higher strength fencing around the new port of Santa Teresa. Other than that, it's just barbed wire.
Right. Okay. And
This is true, and it might be interesting for some to know that there is what many have referred to as sort of the invisible wall that we see down in New Mexico. Because of the high technology with Sandia Labs and Los Alamos National Labs, Kirtland Air Force Base, and Cannon Air Force Base, they have actually experimented quite a bit. And much of what we have learned, many don't know this, with the drones that we're currently using around the world, were practiced along the Mexican borders against immigrants, etc.
And
Infrared equipment.
I think people should be aware that whether you don't want people to come in your country, remember these fences also keep you in. You know, so I think you should, if you speak to people and they say, well, I don't agree, I want to keep people out, please make them aware that this is also a prison as soon as you start putting up walls on borders.
Thank you. And I would thank you so much. And thank you. I will stay. I'm going to stay for questions, to continue conversations. If you didn't sign in, please sign in. I left some cards in the back as well. And if you if you would like to keep that stone, to carry it with you as a physical reminder of our conversation today, you're welcome to. And if not, then feel free to just pop it right back in the bowl at the back of the table. But thank you again so much, and thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Don.
I can travel with this. You got that. Okay, thanks.